Well, good afternoon, National Museum of American History and Smithsonian colleagues, and welcome to the staff learning series hosted by the National Museum of American History. The series aims to explore the trends, topics, and research that relate to the public so that we may better understand our current and future audiences. My name is Adam Roseanne, and I'll be your host and moderator for today's talk and the series. We are honored. We are joined by Jane Grabias, the Director of Programs at Philadelphia250, and Dr. Elizabeth Grant of the National Liberty Museum for a conversation on their planning for Philadelphia's 250th activities. Jane is the Director of Programs at Philadelphia250, the nonprofit helping to create the People's Commemoration in Philadelphia for the 250th anniversary. Its mission is to engage Philadelphia's diverse communities and neighborhoods in commemoration and help connect the ideals and spirits of the Declaration of Independence and the challenges, debates, and opportunities we face today, individually and collectively. She completed the coursework for a Ph.D. in criminal justice. Previously, she worked at the United Way of Greater Philadelphia and Southern New Jersey, overseeing corporate partnership, and was Director of Programs for the Eisenhower Fellowships, an international exchange program. Jane has a BA from Swarthmore College and an MPA from Columbia University School of International Public Affairs. She serves on the board of Philadelphia chapter of the League of Women Voters as chair of Voter Services Committee. Dr. Elizabeth Grant has 20 years of experience in history, art, and design education. Her professional history combines collections-based learning with community engagement practices, and she is particularly passionate about fostering co-creation and participatory learning experiences. She is Philadelphia's Chief Program Officer for the National Liberty Museum. Previously, she was the Director of Education at the Museum of the American Revolution in Philadelphia and has held leadership roles at the Royal Institute of British Architects and the New York Historical Society. She has a Ph.D. and a master's in philosophy and American studies from the University of Birmingham in the United Kingdom. And she has published on the intersection of race, place, in the memory and post-industrial cities. Dr. Grant sits on the board of trustees for the National Council for History Education. Please note that this discussion is being recorded with closed captioning, and I will be helping our speakers by moderating the chat. So please add your questions there. And lastly, I would love to hear from you. Take a moment today or tomorrow and share your thoughts on the series, past speakers, and future ideas. Share them so we can schedule them. And with that, thank you to our two speakers for joining us today, and welcome to the Staff Learning Series. We're honored to have you both with us.
Thank you so much, Adam. It's such a pleasure to be here alongside all of you, DC friends, and of course with my wonderful colleague Liz Grant here in Philadelphia. So what we'll do today is we'll just take the first half and talk about my organization, Philadelphia250, what we're doing as Adam mentioned, to create a people's commemoration here in Philadelphia, the birthplace of democracy, ground zero for 2026 and the 250th anniversary of our country. We're super excited. We are literally the face of independence and democracy for all of America, and that's something that we take very seriously here. Even though it's something you can drive by and walk by every day, or in the case of Liz, like eat your sandwich while you're feeding the pigeons in front there on Independence Mall. So I'll give a little background about my organization, also give you some context for like the ecosystem here in Philadelphia. It's pretty noisy because it's not just the 250th, or it's the 250th, and because of that, we're attracting a lot of other things that you may have heard of, such as the World Cup. FIFA is coming to town for 6 weeks, and Major League Baseball and so forth. So I'll just dive in, then I'll hand it over to my colleague Liz. She'll talk about her museum, and then really we wanted to use as a case study for how we're leveraging this moment and our kind of vision and belief about how the 250th is relevant today. Sort of a case study for a collaboration we're working on together that is, you'll see, kind of expresses different ways of our sort of vision and mission. So without that, I'll get started. These are my slides. So this is actually a really lovely picture, and I'll kind of start by explaining what you're looking at. Like I said, we're trying to do a people's commemoration. Those of you historians may know that every major historical milestone around the founding of our country has been celebrated in Philadelphia, 1876, 1926, and 1976. And they were all kind of these World's Fair type events. Scattered around Philadelphia are remnants of these amazing world fairs that were unique, that brought in millions of visitors, and were to varying degrees successful. The most successful, and perhaps it's because it was so long ago, was the original in 1876. There was a giant World's Fair. It brought in like literally like I think half the population came to the city, and I think when we thought about how did we want to honor this moment in Philadelphia, we looked at the precedent, we looked at history, and we looked at what was good and bad about it. And then we thought about the contemporary context, where we are today, coming out of a pandemic, post George Floyd, and all sorts of social and racial justice movements. And then looking at our political sphere and what's going on at the national, the federal level, and the state level around the 250th. Politics and funding and all those things that kind of make you think about, like, what can we actually realistically do? What should we do? How do we respond to this moment, and who we are? Like, we're Philadelphia. We're one of the top, 10 cities in the country, but we're the poorest big city. We have a lot of social and economic justice challenges here around poverty, inequality, drug abuse and addiction, gun violence. So we have to be sort of aware that, you have to take into account where you are and what's going to resonate. And when it came down to push came to shove, we sort of said we really want to think about a commemoration that centers our people. It centers our voices, our shared histories, histories that have been told and that are well known. Ben Franklin, right? He's all over the place. The Liberty Bell, it's like in part of every logo. But what about some of the individuals, people of color, people of indigenous background, who are less celebrated, whose voices are known maybe only in smaller circles or among specialists? So we really thought about a commemoration that was inclusive, that had values of tolerance and acceptance, and diversity, and one that was also transformative, right? The past commemorations were really transformative. They left behind buildings and created museums, bridges, parks, right? They're really amazing things, but we also knew that we weren't going to have that kind of investment at the federal, state, or city level. So we had to be aware that our goal wasn't going to be creating like some new monument. It was to think about what kind of legacy do we want to leave that's different from these past top-down, super heavy World's Fair commemorations. And we really centered, like I said, on elevating people, the stories, and the places that matter to us, and thinking about what's the purpose, what kind of legacy. So looking here, this is actually something that we did in 2022. We ran a legacy competition. It was a grant competition seeking ideas from the people. It was a public call. We went to Philadelphians and we said, hey, we want to know what you think are legacy projects, right? Given the context that I just shared with you, what are ideas from the people, things you're doing, things you want to do. They could be new ideas. And this is sort of a picture that kind of represents who we are, our vibe, and it was the 11 semifinalist teams from our legacy competition that ranged from Special Olympics. You can see there was a group of indigenous people who had a project. We had a really interesting kind of co-living project focused on fighting gentrification around universities in West Philadelphia. We had a storytelling project focusing on immigrant stories in a very famous open air market in South Philadelphia. And we ended up selecting 3 of these legacies that we continue to fund. But that's just to give you an overview. So let me get into like the meat of the matter here. And I'm, of course, immediately. Here we are. So Philadelphia250, who are we? We're a nonprofit. We're an independent 501c3. We are not part of the city government. We are funded by city government, as well as many corporate and private individuals. And our goal, as I said, is to take the 250th and sort of celebrate Philadelphia as a city of first, and do a commemoration differently as a model, a people's commemoration. We looked at other cities that celebrated anniversaries. Detroit 300. There was like Quebec 450, right? Places have done this before. We're not the only ones who've had a birthday, but we wanted to think about what worked there, what made sense here in Philadelphia in again, taking into account our kind of social and economic context. And like I said, we really wanted a model for a commemoration focused on people that was inclusive and transformational. So what's going on in Philadelphia? Let's like sort of get a handle on it, because the 250th is not, like I said, just about us. Like, we're going to do a people's commemoration. I'm going to talk a little bit more about it, but I wanted to give you a sense of like what we're kind of negotiating here, right? 2026 is exciting. It's going to be probably one of the biggest years that Philadelphia and probably other cities in the country have seen for a long time, for a generation, right? Haven't done this in 50 years. And to be honest, 1976 in Philadelphia wasn't really like a model commemoration. It was kind of ugh, icky for various reasons. But here we have all of the different partners that we're trying to coordinate with, like the city of Philadelphia. We have a brand new mayor. She just came in January 1st. So there was a little bit of waiting to see who would be in power here in the city. And that's, led to some good and bad situations. But we're proud to have our first female mayor of Philadelphia, also African-American, Sherelle Parker. We're working with the Chamber of Commerce. They want to do a clean and green initiative. Visit Philadelphia, our major tourism and sort of branding organization, the visitor center that welcomes people right on Independence Mall. It's right next to the Liberty Bell. People come in, they get oriented, they can have a gift shop, they figure out where to go, where was Ben Franklin buried, where's Betsy Ross's house. World Affairs Council, we're expecting diplomats and dignitaries in 26. The Convention and Visitors Bureau, they're booked at like 130%. Like, if you're going to try and come to Philadelphia in 2026, I hope you have a friend who has a spare room, because there is not going to be a single hotel room, and I'm pretty sure there's none right now. The Convention and Visitor Bureau business is all booked, because everyone wants to come here in 2026. We don't even have to sell it, right? This thing sells itself. It's almost like, whoa, wait a minute, too much. The Park Service is doing a lot of work to upgrade the area around Independence Hall, opening up a new museum. The First Bank is being renovated. So Liz can talk a little bit more about what's happening in her neck of the woods that's literally down by Independence Hall. And there's these huge major events. We have 6 World Cup soccer games. Each one apparently is like hosting the Super Bowl. So we're going to do this 6 times. That's great. I can talk about how that's also a challenge for us. It sort of like sucks up all the oxygen in the room, to be honest. We're also going to be hosting the Major League Baseball. Was it the All-Star game? I think WWE Wrestling is coming into town. Like, anybody and everything just is like, oh, Philadelphia, yeah, sure. And I don't know. Nobody, I guess, says no. Everyone says yes. And of course, Welcome America is doing. They always do. It's a local organization, private, public, nonprofit that does. We do an annual concert on the Parkway to celebrate 4th of July. They do the fireworks, right? We have our own stuff. So kind of the 250th is in the middle of like kind of a noisy crowd. And to be honest, the big gorilla in the room is the World Cup. We were fortunate last week that they announced the schedule of the games. So at least now we can plan our events. And so that's kind of a major hurdle. And the next step will be to get the attention of city and state funders and supporters. So Philadelphia 250, what is unique about us within all of these actors, this sort of kaleidoscope, and this is not even everybody, by the way, I'm just trying to give you the major players to understand that we're sort of trying to work collaboratively, complementarily with everyone. But what makes my organization unique is that we're the only 250th organization that's focused on community engagement, bringing the celebration and the commemoration to the neighborhoods, not just Independence Hall, not just Lincoln Financial Field in South Philly where they play the games, but out to Southwest, Africa Town, up to the far northeast, where we have apparently our 3rd most popular language in Philadelphia is Portuguese. It's a huge Brazilian community. We're going to go out to West Philly, up to Germantown, which also has, George Washington was up there. Like, a lot of battles happened. There's history, there's culture in all parts of our city. And we want to make sure that the amazing economic and sort of cultural impacts of the World Cup and all these 500,000 visitors minimum who are coming is equitably distributed, right? Like, there's a lot of criticism about these major events that they tend to focus the benefits and visitors only see sort of a slice of who you are and what you are. And what we're based commemorations and celebrations and little festivals, sort of getting everyone to sort of like, all right, sort of come together in the same time in the same place to celebrate Southwest Philly and the amazing entrepreneurs and restaurants of Africatown, so that we sort of get to know each other a little better. And there's two reasons. One, obviously, is economic. People want to share in the prosperity that's happening, but it's also, there's a really big civic unification approach, thinking about our political system right now, a city that's sort of unequal in terms of economic prosperity, that we want to sort of bring ourselves together and say, well, what unites all Philadelphians, right? These values of the Declaration that were created here, what do we think about them now? Why do they matter, and how do they matter for different parts of town, different kinds of people of different ages, different backgrounds, people who have been here their whole lives in Philadelphia, multiple generation, or someone who just came a few years ago as an immigrant or a refugee or just came from another town. So we're really thinking about what are the ways in which we can build civic pride and civic connection, in addition to bringing kind of attention and prosperity. So our mission is sort of varied, but we're unique in that sense that we're the only ones thinking about neighborhood. We're the only ones thinking about community engagement, or not thinking, but actually creating programming focused on community engagement, and then creating these places and opportunities throughout 2026 where we can all come together in those ways. So our activities, we sort of call them from stoops to stadium, stoops being the stoops that Philadelphians like to sit on and chat with each other. But our programs are really focused on civic engagement, storytelling, and legacy. And if you look at the far left, the programs that I'm developing as director of programs, one is a coordination function, people's programs, right? Like museums, like the National Liberty Museum, the National Constitution Center, the Museum of the American Revolution, as well as, small galleries and cultural centers all over the city want to create. They're inspired by this moment. So they're creating their own exhibits and conferences and theater performances. You can the wealth of ideas. So we're trying to coordinate that with a calendar so that you don't just come and see what's at the Constitution Center. You can also go up to Germantown. You can also see what's in the neighborhoods of Mount Area or North Philadelphia, and sort of sees, things from a different perspective. And so there's a lot of actors that we're trying to coordinate with in that respect, and also just be a place where people can find information, right? The Declaration Station I'm really excited about. I can talk a lot more about. That's this mobile pop-up thing that we've designed that's going to go around town starting this summer. We're going to be building it this spring, and we're going to ask people, what do they think about the 250th, the semi-quincentennial? What do you think about liberty or equality or freedom? Like, what do these things mean today? And how do they, like, what should we do about it? Like, what am I going to do to help make sure that there is equality in my neighborhood, to make sure that there's freedom? If I think freedom means freedom to breathe good air, what am I going to do? Am I going to help with park cleanups? So we're going to try and go around and engage people in conversation about these fundamental ideas, and how do they manifest today? If I believe such a thing about liberty, then maybe this is the kind of person I should vote for, and connect it to action, get people a little more engaged. Share Your Stories is just about storytelling. We all connect through stories, and that's just a way to get people to share things about their stoop, their corner, a person, a place, a thing that matters, right? And that we can celebrate together. What unifies, like I talked a little bit, if you look at the middle column, about this idea of neighborhood gateways. These are just physical locations. We're thinking about 10, that's one per council district here in Philadelphia, places where you can go for 1 or 2 weekends in 2026. Everyone's, all right, we're all going to go to Africatown in Southwest Philadelphia, and we're going to set up a sort of mini festival in a park. Philadelphia250 will bring its programming, its Declaration Station. It's going to celebrate some of our legacy projects and investments that we've been working on. And some of our storytellers, and people can come and pick up a map, walk around the neighborhood, explore the broader area. Restaurants will be open, offering specials, little cultural centers and museums. They can be open extra hours so you can see what their exhibits are. And so everyone can kind of come and celebrate this part of town for this weekend. The following weekend, we're going to go way up to the far northeast, which is literally like an hour's drive, and see what's going on up there, because that's kind of a big open space a lot of people maybe haven't been to. So we're going to sort of get to know ourselves better, coordinate it with the city with all of these local actors. And so I'm super excited about that. And one of the things that we're bringing to the neighborhoods is this Redeclare project that Liz and I will be talking about. That's super interesting. I talked a little bit about legacy. I'll just touch upon it one more. As I said, we kind of sourced our own legacy projects. These people sourced kind of social impact projects. The three that we chose were focused on Special Olympics, cities of inclusion for people with disabilities. The second was this storytelling initiative called Our Market by a really amazing, well-known muralist and activist from the 9th Street Market. And then the third is working with a local playground, a very well-known institution called Smith Playground, creating a craft and educational program for children called Revolutionary Action Figures, where they kind of create their own figures based on local leaders of color who are inspiring. You know, people who, you don't have to be Martin Luther King Jr. You could be a trash man who became a hero during the pandemic because he collected, you know, all sorts of resources and equipment and safety equipment for sanitation workers. So, but our next phase is to put a challenge to the corporate and nonprofit leaders in our community to say, well, what's your legacy pledge? Habitat for Humanity has pledged to build an extra 250 new units of affordable housing. That's a pretty amazing thing. So we'll be looking to our big corporate leaders like Comcast, Independence Blue Cross Healthcare, Philabundance, which is a major food pantry, to say, well, what's your pledge? What can you do to accelerate your impact and bring positive benefits to Philadelphia as a legacy that lives beyond 2026? So that's pretty exciting. So that's kind of an overview of what we're doing. I gave you like a pretty fast review of everything we're doing. But as my sometime in 2027, right? I have to you know, make sure my resume is up to date, but we really are thinking a lot about partnership, because if we're thinking about ways to bring resources to communities to create impact, obviously we want our donors, our sponsors to feel like they're investing in something long term. So partnerships are a way to leverage resources, combine sort of mission and vision, and put it towards the purpose of something that can be experienced and enjoyed for 2026, but yet its impacts and the sort of capacity and learnings live on somewhere in a permanent basis. So Liz and I came together. We were sort of trying to find ways to partner together, and we came to them with an idea for a series of neighborhood-based public artworks that would be created through an intensive process of deep community engagement and creative placemaking over 2 years, which we would pick 10 neighborhoods throughout a public hall throughout Philadelphia, match them with 10 artists who are interested in deepening their ability to work with communities, and have them engage in a series of workshops talking about ideas of liberty, legacy, life, liberty, legacy, right? Coming out of the Declaration and playing a little bit into the mission of the National Liberty Museum itself. So we're excited. These could be public artworks that could be murals. We're known as a city of murals, but they also could be theater. It could be music. We're, you know, all sorts of different kinds of media. So this is sort of we kind of wanted to share it as a case study for, if you're thinking about a people's commemoration, like, what can you bring? What can you build? That's not simply a party, simply fireworks, something, you know, concerts. All these things are wonderful celebratory moments, but we really were thinking of like, how can we build that civic capital, that social capital, so that in 2027 people look behind and they're like, oh, that thing we did, like, I made a new friend, I made a new connection. Like there's something that we can take with us in addition to a memory. So this is sort of combining our areas of community engagement, honoring place and neighborhood, and thinking about legacy. So I'll stop talking and I'm going to hand it over to Liz so that she can talk a little bit about her museum, why they were a partner, what do they think about the 250th as a cultural organization, and we'll take it from there. So Liz, over to you.
Fantastic. Oh, great. Okay.
Sorry.
So if I can share, can I share my screen?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, how's that? Hopefully you can all
Okay.
see.
Yep.
Yes, fantastic, great. I apologize that my slides are just not as pretty as Jane. She did a really good job, and will give me some lessons on how to do that later. So as Jane said, I really just wanted to provide a little bit of context about the National Liberty Museum, and how our recent changes in strategic focus, direction, and intent have dovetailed with our planning for 2026 and have led to our partnership with Philadelphia 250 and involvement on this Redeclare project, which we certainly see as a stepping stone to the museum becoming a much more dynamic and responsive community resource. And then I'm going to provide a little bit of a sort of a level or sort of like a picture about where the museum fits into wider sort of activities within the historic district, and even a little bit to the state level, because I think that's a kind of relevant to the discussion. So first, a little bit about NLM before everybody hopped on. Adam said, I think I've been to your museum about 2 years ago. It's very possible that you were, but I will say that the museum has gone through a significant shift that I'm going to tell you about. But just to tell you where we are, as Jane alluded to, we are right in the middle of Philadelphia's historic district. We can see Independence Hall 2 blocks away. We can watch the work on the First Bank happening from our front door. We are within a stone's throw of several major institutions that are all dedicated to telling the story of the nation's founding. Our mission is to connect, educate, and inspire people to explore and advance the complex practice of liberty. We produce up to 3 exhibitions a year that blend contemporary visual arts and humanities-based storytelling to create opportunities for authentic and nuanced and respectful interactions around the idea of liberty. Our education programs really focus on civic leadership, and our public programs are about creating spaces for civil dialogue, creative problem solving, and community building. So that's kind of what we're up to at the moment. We opened in 2000, so next year marks our 25th anniversary, and we are really, as I alluded to, in this kind of significant moment of change. Just on the eve of the pandemic, the team started thinking and really recognizing that the landscape around us were changing, new museums, new sites, and the dialogue about liberty, certainly in our polarized times, had also shifted quite significantly. And we set about very intentionally thinking about what our museum, as a museum dedicated to the concept of liberty, could bring to that conversation. So we did 3 years of experimental exhibitions and programs that invited artists, culture leaders, community leaders, subject experts of all kinds into a dialogue about liberty. What does it mean today? How do you experience it? How do you express it? How does it exist in tension with other values that we hold clear or hold dear? So all of that work evolved and culminated in a new strategic interpretive plan for the museum, for a new vision for the museum that centers deep and authentic community engagement and co-curation that will ensure our exhibitions are as relevant and responsive to the broadest cross-section of our city, its residents, its workers, and our visitors as it possibly can be. Our museum is unique in some ways, kind of like Jane's organization in that is also unique. We were not founded around a collection. We don't have a founding collection. We are founded around an idea. And so this new vision for the museum really sees that we will be creating our collection in our content with the broadest possible public. So that's what we'll be working on in the coming years, is really building our internal capacity for that work and formalizing our approach to community co-curation of our exhibitions and programs so that we can really promote this active and inclusive pursuit of liberty. And our partnership with Philadelphia 250 and the Redeclare project is really going to help amplify those efforts over the next 2 years. So just I'll zoom out a little bit to say, between now and 2026, we're part of various different statewide and local initiatives that sort of connect us on the road to 2026. So in partnership with the state, National Liberty Museum is working to expand our flagship education program, which is a year-long civic action program from Philadelphia, where we have been operating with this program for about 12 years to schools across the state. The idea being that by 2026, 4th to 8th graders in every region of the state will have had a chance to collaborate on this in this program. What's particularly exciting about that is that it opens up this whole new perspective for the young people we engage here in Philadelphia to new communities and new environments, and sort of bring them into dialogue with each other on a much more local level. Here within the historic district, as you can imagine, there is a lot of work happening among a consortium of about 25 to 30 museums, historic sites, the National Park, the Visitors Bureau, really thinking about how we are planning and promoting all of the different exhibitions and programs and initiatives that we've been working on for many years, ensuring that those are lined up and are making sense, that we're sharing resources and so on, and that we're promoting them collectively. We are working together to identify much needed improvements to infrastructure, particularly around transportation within the historic district, lighting, capital improvements, all of those kinds of things. And then, of course, we are working together to advocate for all of that work and to look for the much needed resources that we hope we can gather to put behind that work, because we want to be able to present ourselves in the best possible way in 2026. So I should note that, and it's probably maybe not even worth noting, but 2026 is already here. The 250th anniversaries are already happening, and Carpenter's Hall, our neighbors across the street, is really kind of kicking off some of the things in the historic district this summer with the first Young People's Continental Congress, which will bring students to the city for an intensive program that in their historic building and to some of the neighboring historic sites. As part of our historic district consortium, we're also working collaboratively to plan, if you can believe it, one of the first kind of historic district-wide celebrations to mark the Independence Day holiday. We collectively have determined that July 2nd will be the day that we are sort of, throwing the big party or the big moment here in the historic district, just acknowledging, as Jane said, that there's a lot of things that happen in the city in different areas. And the intention is to really kind of work together to build muscle memory around this particular day as the day that you can experience what happens in the historic district. So that's kind of the picture here locally. I will say that after that all ends, obviously we, within that consortium in the district, are really hoping for a much more coherent visitor experience, and the benefits of raised visibility about what this neighborhood has to offer. From NLM's perspective, I think what our hope is that we really emerge from all of our participation in this work and in collaborating with Philadelphia250 and the Redeclare project with the tools and tested methods for co-creating with Philadelphia's many communities. Our intention is certainly that the work that we're doing in the lead up to 2026 will have a lasting impact on how people think and engage with one another and actively engage in telling the nation's story, not only in their own neighborhoods, but how those stories can come into the historic district, and we can share them here at the National Liberty Museum to all the many visitors that are going to be here in 2026. So we're certainly excited about the opportunity to be able to elevate those stories and those voices. at that particular time.
Well, great. Fantastic. Is it time for questions? What do you say?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, great. Well, folks,
Yeah.
please do get any, please join me first in thanking our two speakers for that presentation and hearing about plans and collaboration. And please put your questions in the chat. I'd love to hear from you. I guess one question that I have while folks are thinking about it is, it seems like you guys are so far along. Are we behind? Are others behind? Are we ahead? How far along would you say the majority of organizations are in Philadelphia? And is it just you have a very impressive website and lots of partners, or do you think that there's still people are kind of midway in their planning, or they're further along? And then we'll get into some meat of the conversation.
You know,
Do you feel far along?
I think I can say yes for my organization because, you know, we've been at this for some years, even before a lot of people were even willing to like talk about it. I mean, you know, you can imagine in 2019, 2020, people were like, oh, whatever, you know, like it's hard to get people's attention that far in advance. And I think we were kind of struggling with the fact that we knew the past mayor was like, well, I'm not going to be here when this happens. And so there was, you know, you sort of see this. There's an interest in like focusing on like the problems, the very serious problems in front of us, and thinking about something that's some years away was difficult.
Sure.
I think there was also some hope that the federal government would be more involved, that the America 250 Foundation would, because Philadelphia is written into the legislation that established that commission as one of these sort of first among 4 cities that were going to be kind of featured. And so there was some hope that the government would come in and provide some resources. We are been thinking about it a long time. So I'd say, as you know, Philadelphia 250 is ahead. And I think there's, you know, some of the larger museums, I'm sure Liz can speak to this, like the Constitution Center and the Museum of the Revolution, like they already know what they're doing, and they knew 3 years ago what they were doing. I think what may prevent some organizations, I think everyone has a great idea. There are a lot of great ideas out there. What may be preventing people, and is certainly consideration for my organization and Liz's as well, is the funding, right?
Sure.
Unless you have access to a large donor base, you know, pre-existing donor base that is kind of enthusiastic about what you're doing. A lot of people are kind of waiting to make the call about what they're going to do. I think sometime this year, because we have a local.
Yeah, understand. I think we're losing you, Jane. So I'm
Sorry.
going to go. Oh, sorry about that. I'm going to go to Elizabeth. Thank you for that. I'm going to go to Elizabeth. My question to you is something that I often think a lot about. Given how the conversation started, Philadelphia throughout the entire 2026 is booked. You cannot get a hotel room, right? There's so much to do. Is there urgency within the organization, within the National Liberty Museum, to say we have to do a lot, or do we just really need to open the doors and people will come in, right? Are you going to be trying to compete with others, or are you really just going to try to find a way to show and just provide a respite? So how do you find that right balance within your organization? So that you're not competing, but you're also kind of not losing out. Where are you all in that conversation?
Yeah, I don't feel that we're thinking so much about sort of competing for not us as an organization. I'm speaking for the National Liberty Museum. You talk to some of my neighbors, they will feel very differently, I think, because of their business models are different than ours, right? And they're really counting on that huge influx of people who are going to be buying tickets and coming through the door. We're very happy to kind of for the anticipated influx of people who will be here in the historic district in the city, and to see them come through our doors. But we don't see ourselves in competition so much as sort of connecting the wider city to that conversation that's happening here in the historic district. And for us, I think we're most excited about, you know, the communities that we're going to be engaging through Redeclare, and the networks that we're going to be building, and ensuring that they have access to an experience of what we're doing in the historic district.
Great. I have a message from Michelle. I hope it's okay to share this one. Just with so much awesomeness happening all at once, I'm curious to learn more about how or who accessibility is being championed across all the events and offerings anticipated in 2026. Great. Is there a consistent voice in the conversation, or is each individual program responsible for gaining direct insight from the disability community and planning for accessibility in the deliverables? Thank you for that question. And please get your questions in.
That's a great question. Jane, you unmuted, so
I can try and answer it. You know, Philadelphia 250, we've tried to see ourselves as a kind of a coordinator of information, like what are great policies around accessibility, diversity, equity, and inclusion, as we think about the programming. Coordination is really a bit of a bugaboo. So we've tried to put some information out there. Not sure we've been as much of a leader as we should be, but we certainly in some of our principles, as I think I mentioned, this coordinating role around people's programs, this calendar. One of our goals is through that calendar of events is to have everyone who wants to be a part of that to commit to certain principles of accessibility. But my impression is that it is not, it's people have raised this issue before. It's a great question, and I think it's going to be a challenge to make it consistent.
Great. Elizabeth, did you want to address that, or should we go to another question?
Sorry, I thought I unmuted. No, I think Jane's right. I mean, I think that there's organizations that are going to bring their own expertise and rely on their own networks to kind of make the commemoration as accessible as possible. But I think within that, there is a lot of expertise that's going to be tapped and brought together. But like a coherency across is if it's possible, would be beneficial.
Yeah. One thing I really want to kind of touch on, and I wrote this right down. I said, I don't know if I should ask this, but I want to kick off something that you said, Jane, in the very beginning. The fact of the matter is we're almost in a VUCA state: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. You mentioned some of the real harsh realities for the city of Philadelphia, for Philadelphians. And now what we're talking about is a year of activity. And yes, I think we're right to say we're gonna really share some of those stories, but can a year of activity, a year of celebration, a year of commemoration, a year of all this, can it make a dent and improve the lives of those within the city and of life, liberty, and happiness for the city of Philadelphia and its people? Can it do that, or is that too much of an order?
Yeah, I wrestle with this question, Adam, because I come from a background that's around social justice and social impact, and I sort of try to say to our leadership, like, you have these ambitious goals, you have this very beautiful language around inclusion and transformation, but you want to be clear about how much inclusion you can actually create and how much transformation that you can collectively inspire and promote. And when we think about what is success for us as an institution, I want to make sure that our metrics are kind of focused on what we're actually doing in our activities. So when we think about legacy community and these pledges, who tracks that impact? Who holds them accountable, right? Like, I have a lot of issues with that community. Like, I love the idea, and a lot of people are like, oh my God, it's so cool, it's so inspiring. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't want this to turn into something performative. So I think that's a great question. And that's why I think the idea of partnership is so appealing to us, working with someone like Liz's organization. They have expertise, they have a track record. So there's other organizations around small business development, other cultural organizations, working with the school district to bring these conversations and rely and say, like, okay, someone who's a professional educator, here are some tools. But I think you're right. There's only so much you can do. A lot of it depends upon the goodwill of partners like the city or FIFA. And then the last thing I was going to say was, for us, Philadelphia 250, it's not just 1 year. Our programming launches this year in 2024 and runs through 2026, because we really do feel like people need to be primed and prepared and to collect information as we have an election. That's going to change what people think and believe and what could happen. So if we can sort of track and really get the sense of like what's on people's minds and how their reaction to these core ideas changes and how they feel over a couple years, I think that could be transformational in sort of showing Philadelphia, here's what you think and believe. But you're right, like it's going to have to be like limited.
Yeah. We have a question that came in from my good friend and colleague, Anna Grabias. Thank you, Anna, for your question. We love them. How are you thinking about the cadence of programming in 2026, both at your institution and with partners? It's a great question.
I don't know. I'll be honest, because the World Cup organization is trying to avoid a lot of major things going on because it's just deeply problematic from a logistical point of view.
Yeah.
So we're really focusing on like March through the other months, like starting in March and running through October.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. So I think that, within the historic district, we're thinking about sort of how we can sort of be celebrating this historic sites and the historic events that happened in Philadelphia with a series of Philadelphia firsts that we mark every week of the year at our different institutions and kind of through a social media campaign and things like that, just to kind of sort of build that momentum over the course of the year. As I said earlier, we are trying to build the muscle memory around that one particular day, so that all of us are kind of not competing for airspace and for time and attention, so that we can really capitalize on one moment.
I love that. Let's go back to talk about this metrics. I've been thinking a lot about this, and I'm really struggling. What are the things that we really need to know today in the work we do in cultural organizations, museums, these kind of programs? What are the right metrics here that we're going to be tracking? Is it, some thinking about what this marks? Is it about the future? What is worthwhile, especially given, we know a lot more about audience today, and we think about wellness and kind of all those different variables. For each of you, what are some of the things that you're going to be thinking about now and encouraging your organizations and your partners to think about, since we don't have those standards yet?
Yeah, I mean, Jane, I'll jump in. I'm happy to take that first. I mean, I really think it is, it's kind of some of those soft things around mindsets and attitudes that I think, through the kind of iterative programming that we're proposing, that is based around asking questions and inviting people to share their thoughts and reflections, and then sort of tracking how those kind of change. Particularly when we start to, in environments where we're introducing different skill sets, whether it's like creative skill sets through the Redeclare project or advocacy, what have you, sort of how those mindsets can kind of lead when applied, when skills are applied, can kind of lead to greater outcomes. So I think it's going to be about kind of change over time on sort of individual levels. And we certainly have thought about how we're going to be throughout sort of our work together, sort of capturing people's reflections, whether it's through their work or through one-on-one or sort of different kind of survey tools, but it will be about that gradual change over time.
Great. I knew I could count on you, Catherine Ott, a frequent attendee of these series. Catherine writes, self-disclosure, I went to Temple, go Owls. What kind of feedback did you get about life and liberty from younger people, BIPOC people, and what are you doing to get them engaged? Great question. Thank you, Catherine.
Well, maybe I'll just share a little bit about the process for the project. So we don't know what they think yet, honestly, and that's sort of what we want to learn and know, and that this process of deep engagement. So what we hope to do is, is launch the program this summer. We want to do a big launch event 2 years out, July 2024, sort of a panel, citywide panel, socializing the idea of this project, putting out a public call to artists and communities to stand up and say, I might be interested in this, and so over the next several months, we'll be selecting artists, meeting with communities, doing a lot of workshops in the communities themselves to get people to know about this opportunity, to see who might be interested, and we're really thinking, of course, about neighborhoods that may not have had a lot of experience with public art. We have these a lot of great organizations here that have worked deeply in communities. So we're looking for places that may not have had access to this opportunity, obviously outside neighborhoods. So we're going to spend a lot of time in this summer and fall doing the legwork to get the idea and the information out to people, select the artists in the communities by the end of the year, and then in 2025, do a process of matching artists and communities. So what is a community? How does it define itself? Obviously, we'll that's up to them to sort of self-organize. We're thinking it's more geographic, but we'll see. I think simultaneously, Philadelphia 250 through the declaration station that I mentioned, we're going to be doing a lot of community engagement work, and I think there it's going to be much more focused on finding out the answer to your question is what do young children of color, what do immigrants, what do people with disabilities, really trying to piece out how different groups might perceive this opportunity and what they make of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can just say just briefly that through the work that we've done just over the past few years through our a series of different exhibitions, including one that kind of kicked this off, we did a call to artists called Philly's Freedom. And just, it was a pretty open call, you know, what does freedom mean to you in Philadelphia? We launched that in early 2020 and collected submissions all through the summer of 2020. So the responses that we had were very powerful from emerging artists, you know, reflecting on very broadly themes of justice in response to that question. What is freedom? Freedom is justice, and it's justice around particular issues, racial reckoning, policing, and themes that you would have anticipated in that moment. Through our work with our education program in particular, you know, from young people, we hear a lot about some of the issues that Jane brought up early on, and thinking about, you know, gun violence, food insecurity, and those sorts of issues. Those are always top of mind, and I think that's what's going to make this project really interesting, and sort of putting those within the context of this larger discussion of you know, legacy. What is the legacy that we want to leave behind? I happened to peek the follow-on question.
Yeah, please. What do you think?
Would we change the themes if we got too much eye rolling? I think that's part of it, right? Is to kind of, it's iterative. It's an iterative process, and to sort of explore that together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Jane.
think I also would just add on the tail of what she said was, you know, we try to be intentional about using commemoration. Like, a lot of people want to celebrate, but there's like a lot of ambivalence out there. I've talked to some community engagement practitioners. I'm like, what do you think? You know, people are going to say, and he's like, I don't think most people really give a hoot right now. They don't care, right? They've got other things going on in their daily lives. So this idea of, you know, it is kind of a privilege and a luxury to be able to reflect on some of these ideas. And so we have to be aware of that like, if you're eye rolling, well, that's an answer. Thank you. Like, that's important. That's, you know, that's something we want to document. I'm not here to, you know, encourage people to see this anniversary in a particular way or from a particular perspective. It's like, I just want to know the diversity. You know, I'm going to go in kind of deliberately, naively to say, what do you think? And take the good and the bad and the critiques and the joy, all as a package.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about fundraising. You mentioned that you were hopeful for the federal money to come in. It's not everyone's kind of, as a nation within the city focus on this. So how will you all start thinking about, or how are you all thinking about fundraising, bringing in the dollars for this? Because what we're really now talking about is, you know, city versus city, town versus town, not in competition, but the fact of the matter is everyone's going to be looking for these dollars to do both the infrastructure that I think Elizabeth talked so well about, but also the need to kind of do programs and staff up, so to speak. So how will you all start thinking about this, and what is the message here to partner cities and communities, and how do we work together, and how at the same time do we have to think about our own entity?
I mean, we're kind of, oh, go ahead.
No.
Well, I mean, one thing I'll just kind of point out, I mean, like, timing wise, you know, we're kind of at the moment where if the state doesn't step up, then that's where we will miss that window, because the upcoming budget is it. So that kind of puts a time for a very clear line in the sand about when we need that support from the state level. I don't know, Jane, if you want to talk about sort of like the foundation landscape or the city, and where you see.
I mean, when I talk to people, I'm like, you better have an idea now, and you better ask for your money right now, because it's sooner or later you're going to have to call it, right? Like, we know Redeclare is basically a 2-year process. So if we don't get sufficient funding by a certain date, which we've talked about, right, it's not going to happen, right? And so we often think about Philadelphia 250. We think about, all right, well, if we have all the money, these are all the things we can do. But if we only have 80%, how do we scale back? If we only have 50%, how do we scale back? So we are trying to think sort of flexibly. I also think the idea of partnership and And not being so like as Philadelphia 250, like maybe sometimes we've had this idea like, well, we have to create our own original things because we have to like set ourselves apart. And I'm like, it's okay if we partner with Mural Arts and we just do our workshops together. And some of those workshops can ask questions that are relevant to redeclare, and we can test out our declaration station prompts there. So we've done a little bit of like taking some small dollars that we got from some grants, like 10 or 15,000, and all right, I'm going to give it to you, Mural Arts, and we're kind of work out some stuff together because I know they're going to do a project they already got funding for. We have some funding. And so I've been trying to think about ways to take smaller dollars and say, okay, you guys over there, if I give you this resource, will you give me access to that resource?
Yeah,
So that things are not so
that's great.
isolated as well.
My final question to you both: do you think 2026 is a staycation for folks of Philadelphia, or is it a vacation? Are we going to be expecting people to be coming from city to city, jumping around? Are they really, due to the cost of hotels and kind of attractions, and they're going to be sticking around? What's your prediction?
Well, we'll be here, right, Jane?
Yeah. I kind of want to be here. The last time we have I guess there's some people who will Airbnb their houses and they like jet away, and that's cool too. The last time we had like a major disruption, I think was when the Pope came to town, right? And it was, it kind of took over. He shut down all the streets, but at the same time, there was like a freedom. I don't know. I think the World Cup period could be a little intense.
Yeah, I agree, Jane. I will say we're so immersed in this, like, as Jane said, we've been talking and planning for years, but I honestly don't know that the broader public is even thinking about it. They know the World Cup is coming, and I think that's the level of sort of planning that they're preparing for, and that might cause them to Airbnb their house or whatever they're going to do. But I don't know that anybody is even sort of conscious of just what a big event this is going to be. And to be honest, like between now and then, there are a lot of things that could be happening that maybe don't have commemoration right at the forefront. So, we'll see.
Yeah. Well, on that we'll see note, I would like to thank you both for participating in this conversation. It's been wonderful to have you. It is really exciting to see your plans, and I can speak for myself and the series. Please keep us posted, and love to see and hear what you all are up to. And thank you everybody for joining, and we'll see you on Tuesday for our next conversation on new data from Nielsen on Black and African Americans. And I look forward to seeing you all. And again, thank you to our speakers, and everyone have a great rest of your week and day. Bye, everybody.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.